Hello, everybody, and welcome to Chain Mailing with Design and Adorn. I am your host today, Richard Swanborg. I'm going to talk to you about the basic techniques in chainmail. That is these basic chains, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, as well as the Japanese weaves. So the Japanese flower, one of my favorites. It is beautiful. It is lovely. The basic Japanese chains. So Japanese lace. I love it. It is so light, so airy. I'll be talking to you about the tools that we use, the pliers, my sharp nose tweezers that I always like to have handy. And it's just going to be a good time. So I hope everybody has a great time today. Let me know where you're from, what sort of chainmail you like to do. Today's going to be a little bit easier than the other couple of days. It's going to be the Japanese techniques and the basic techniques are a simpler technique. There isn't very much mechanically going on. They are very straightforward and simple. I'm going to go over the simple way that you do them. That is where you open all of the rings, start out at one end, and go all the way to the other end. There is a faster method for doing it where you only open half of the rings, and I will talk briefly about that when I talk about the 1-1 because, well, it does require a little bit of resources in order for me to demonstrate multiple techniques, and I have a limited number of resources and time. So, to start out with, the basic chainmail techniques. This is the place where everyone starts. It is just linking one ring into another ring. There is not much magic behind that. So as you graduate up, you of course learn how to fold, flip, manipulate things, interlock things in new ways. But at its core, you are always talking chainmail, and that is one ring into another ring. So as you increase the number of rings, we've got different terms for that. The 1-1 is the simplest. It is the foundation. It is also the weakest. If you tug on this, it'll be easier to pull this open than it will be to pull something like a 2-2. It's still, if you use a nice heavy gauge of jump ring, like we used last week when we did the On the Rocks, you will remember, of course, we did a 1-1 chain for our core. It is plenty strong because I use these really heavy 16 gauge, let me double check that. Yep, 16 gauge copper jump rings. I love them. They are my favorite brand of jump ring. They are so much fun to use. I use them all over the place. As you can see here, that's the smaller of the two rings that I'm going to be using to demonstrate with today. So, to do a simple 1-1 chain, you start out with your base. Whatever base it can be, you could start out with your clasp, you could start out with a paper clip. I personally love to use these hammer tone rings by TierCast, and you just link one ring through the first ring. You close that ring. Oh, actually I should talk about opening and closing jump rings first. I almost forgot. I am terribly sorry. I apologize for that. I always do like to talk about the opening and closing of jump rings. Where is my sacrificial cheap, gonna destroy every single jump ring I have in this bag. Here we go. So, when you get your jump rings, they start out like this. They will be a single ring of metal, generally made from a wire. They will have a little slit in them. You can see that that slit has a little bit of a gap between it. And what we're going to be doing is we are closing the gap. We're bringing one end of the wire into contact with the other end of the wire. To do that, we grab the jump ring on one side with one pair of pliers. We grab the jump ring on the other side with the other pair of pliers. Now, I personally recommend using a flat nose plier and a bent nose plier. It is my favorite combination. It is the one I use the most. I also will sometimes use two flat nose if I'm starting to get into a tighter space where I need a little bit more control. I'll actually flip to the tip if I'm working with really tiny jump rings, but You do not want to be using the tips of your bent nose plier. You want those tips, they keep them out of the way. You want to have as much control as possible, and that means as much contact as possible, which is why I like the flat nose and the bent nose pliers. You grab one on each side, you take it. I always hold one hand steady and I twist with the other one. I happen to just like to use my left hand as the steady hand and my right hand does all the twisting and wiggling. So to open a jump ring, you take it, you twist away, or you could twist towards. It does not make a difference. But once it is open, you can set it to the side. You can do whatever you're going to do. When it's time to close the same jump ring, again, you grab it with the two pliers, making sure that you are not accidentally grabbing any other jump rings. So if you've got some other jump rings just hanging on the side of it, you do not want to accidentally grab a hold of them. It'll give you less control. You can slip, you can slide things around, things will fall off. But then when you close it, you grab it on either side, you hold one hand steady, and you close with the other hand. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. We wiggle it back and forth in order to make sure that we are getting a good close on it. If you happen to get it closed, boom, you got it there. If, when you go to wiggle it, you opened your jump ring, you close it, and you can't get it to slide past the other side of the ring. I don't know how well this ever shows up on the camera, but if you take a look here, when I brought that wire up, it made contact with the other side of the jump ring. When it does that, it is not able to move past it. That's what causes it to stick. So, to fix that, we just take it, we open it up again, and we bring it out a little bit. Tap, 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 until we're able to get it into place. Now, the other common thing that happens is when you go to close it, you still got this little gap here that my tweezers are big enough to, or small enough that I can just slide them right through that gap. In order to fix that, you do not, never, ever, ever, ever try to squeeze it from the sides. Never. You'll deform the jump ring. What you want to do is grab it on either side as close to the gap as you can without overlapping, and you just wiggle it back and forth. Slowly slide it back and forth until you feel it making contact. Once it makes contact, it will be closed. That's all there really is to opening and closing jump rings. One of my favorite parts about jump rings is you can open them, you can close them, you can open them, you can close them again and again and again, almost indefinitely. Well, actually it depends on the material it's made from, but my favorite jump rings that I use, these ones, I can open and close 12 times without them breaking. And that is 12 all the way open, all the way closed. So, for example, I made this like 10 years ago. I could go ahead and disassemble it and rearrange it into something brand new if I wanted to. And I'll talk about that pattern in a little bit. So, without further ado now, we are going to go ahead and start with our chainmail. I'm going to start out by demonstrating a basic 1-1 chain. Then I will demonstrate a 2-2 going on to a 3-3. As well, when I do the 3-3, I'll show you a little pattern that I like to do when I am making my 3-3s. And then I will go on and show you the Japanese flowers, or Japanese technique. So, with my 1-1, I will go and link my first ring into this hammer tone base ring, the same ring that I talked about. I go ahead, I grab it on one side, I grab it on the other side, just like I said, and then I go up, 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 and you might hear that little pop. I'm trying to get it to pop nice and loud. That pop is the metal of the jump ring hitting the opposite side. Now, I'm using a brass jump ring. It is much more inclined to make that popping noise than, say, an aluminum jump ring would. The aluminum jump ring that I use to demonstrate with does not make any popping noise. Therefore, I don't talk about it there anymore. I have learned that lesson. So, once you have your first ring in place for the 1-1, we take a second jump ring and we just go through the first ring, just like the name implies, one ring through one ring. You go ahead, you close it. You can see me tapping it here. That's because I accidentally got it a little bit too close. So I back it up, I pull it up, and there it is. And I can hear that little popping noise of the ring closing. As I take my third ring, again, one ring into one ring, that's a 1-1. I grab it on either side of the plier, I take it, and I bring it closed. 1, 2, 3, there it goes. Now, when I close it, you may notice that I take my pliers, I'm grabbing it on both sides of that wire, but you'll see me actually overshoot a little bit and then wiggle it back. If you're watching from above, I'm going over and back. That little bit of over and back is to break the memory of the wire. I could go into the full details of the yield strength and how you're trying to force the wire to yield versus elastic deformation, but basically, metal has memory, it resists change, therefore, once you get it going in a direction, it's going to want to spring back in the opposite direction to the direction that you're moving it. So, if I, for example, take this jump ring, I will go ahead and close it up, and I will not close it all the way, and you can see it actually spring back. So you have to go and deform it a little bit past where you want it to go, so when it springs back, it is springing back right to where you want it to be. So, now, I did talk about how there is a faster way to do some of these techniques. In this one, it is very simple, very straightforward. From the end of your chain, the very last ring, you will take a closed jump ring. That is a jump ring that you would have closed at the beginning of your project. So you open a certain number of jump rings, you close a certain number of jump rings. If you close the jump ring, you can take an open jump ring, you can hook it to the end of your project, you can hook the closed jump ring onto that one. Again, one ring into one ring. You close it up, you heard that little pop, and there you go. Here we have it. To see it again, I always believe in demonstrating things at least twice. You've got your open jump ring. You hook it onto the end of your piece. The end is always the opposite of where you started. Now you could do this freehand, no end at all, where you can build on either side. But a lot of people like to have the end because it gives them a point of reference. That way they are always working towards something. But we've got our open jump ring. It's still hanging out there open. We hook the other one, and you can see I don't open these that much. You do not have to open them really wide. I go ahead and close that jump ring up. Boom. One ring to one ring. Nice, simple, very easy. You can see here my 1-1. Next, I'll demonstrate the 2-2. That is 2 rings into 2 rings. So as you go along the entire length, it's 2 to 2 to 2 to 2. And then I'll talk about the 3-3. So the next one, the 2-2, you start out the same, 1 ring through your base ring. You never try to manipulate 2 rings simultaneously. You always do them 1 ring at a time. Until a ring is closed, you are not done with it. Now, sometimes there is manipulations that have to, whoa, I just hit my camera accidentally. Sometimes there are manipulations that have to take place while the ring is still open, but such as linking things together. If you're doing the fast way of Byzantine, you might be bringing 2 Byzantine weaves into the same spot, but ultimately, you are not done with a step until you have closed the ring. You never leave a ring open. So we close this ring up. There we go. We've got our 2 rings for starting out with. With our 2 starting rings, we take a new open jump ring. We go through the 2, just like that, and we go ahead and close it up. 2 rings through 2 rings. That means I need a second ring. I take the second ring. I link it through the first. or through the first pair. Notice, I go through both of the rings. If I went through just one of the rings, that would be a different technique. Now, I like to say in chainmail, there is no such thing as doing something wrong. You're just doing a different technique. And probably not the technique that we're currently working on. But that is how you experiment, you learn. It is a lot of fun to do. It's how I taught myself originally the first 5 techniques that I taught myself, which were the tutu, the Byzantine, the box weave, the round weave, and the inverted round. So we've got our 2 rings going through 2 rings. We're ready to move to the next pair. So I take my new ring, I go through the 2 rings, and I close that ring up. Again, I am grabbing it on both sides of the cut. I am bringing it close, and there we go. Wiggle, 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 and it's in place. I take a 3rd ring. Nope, this is the 5th ring. Goes through the same 2 rings as the first one. They'll be sitting side by side that way. Wiggle, 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 and go ahead and close it up. And I'm going to go ahead and close this ring quickly. Close 1 ring. Close 2 rings. Because I've decided I wanted to do this a little bit faster. So to do it faster, I take my 1 open ring. I hook on the 2 rings at the end of my pattern. Whoops, got to get it up over the X. X marks the spot. That's where I'm working. There we go. We've got the 2 rings hanging off there. But before I close it, I take 2 new rings and I hook them on. With the 2 rings in place, I go ahead and close it up. 1, 2, wiggle, wiggle. And there we go. But that leaves me just 1 ring here. The rings travel in pairs. It's a 2-2. So I go through 2 rings from above, 2 rings from below, and boom. There we go. I've got myself my little starter segment. 2-2. Now at this point, you can see that my black hammer tone ring is starting to get pretty well filled up. I will tell you about a fun name for what you call this. This is what is called a squid. It is called a squid because once you've got a whole bunch of little segments hanging off of it, it looks a bit like a little squid or an octopus that might be swimming through the ocean. These are usually used as demonstrations either of every size that can be done with a technique or every technique that can be done with a size of jump ring. It is a great little practice piece. When I am making my squids, I love to make squids. They're a lot of fun to make. They're just a chance to practice every technique. And I like to do them based upon the size of a jump ring and how many different patterns can I do with that one size of jump ring. But here you can see I've got my 1-1 in 2 different sizes, my 2-2 in 2 different sizes. So next I'm going to go to my 3-3. So to do the 3-3, I'm going to first quickly close up a couple of them because I'm going to be doing this a little bit faster. Close 2 coppers and 1 of these brass rings. Set those aside. So a 3-3, just like the rings, just like the patterns before it, you start out exactly the same. 1 ring through your base ring. You add a 2nd ring. Now, I like to do, when I do a 3-3, I always like to do it in an A-B-A pattern. That is color A, color B ring, and a color A ring. And I do that just because I think it adds a nicer style to it. It isn't necessary. You could do it all in 1 color. You could do it in 3 colors. Heck, you could do it in where all of the rings that are facing up are 1 set of colors. All of the rings that are facing to the side are a different set of colors. So your imagination is limitless with this. So on goes my little brass ring. That's my color B ring for this one. So I've got a copper ring, brass ring, copper ring. And I close it up. Here's my copper ring. Copper, brass, copper. Now I won't go into my opening and closing rings as much anymore because, well, that gets repetitive and redundant. But as you can see, I am now taking the first of my 3 rings and going through the 3 base rings. We've got a copper ring. Tap, 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 pass. We've got the brass ring. Tap, tap, pass, back. So the brass is a little bit stiffer than the copper. That's why it has a little bit more spring back to it. And we've got the second copper ring. Grab the copper. Go and pass and pass. There we go. So, and just like before, if I want to do this technique faster, I take my first copper ring for my next set of 3. And I like to hold my rings in my pliers when I'm hooking extra things on. I just find that it helps keep my fingers out of the way. The pliers are a whole lot smaller than my fingers, and my big fat fingers tend to try to get in the way. Another thing to watch out for is I keep my nails pretty short due to chainmail. If you have long nails, they can really get in the way, especially when you get into more advanced techniques. But I now take a new copper, a new brass, and a new copper. Same pattern as before. I hook all 3 of them. And you can see it fills this ring up a lot. That's where having a nice flat nose pliers really starts to come in handy. It keeps that plier out of the way so that I've got a lot of grip on it and I can just pass it back and forth and boom. I've got myself my next set. Letting me skip adding that set to the end. Then I do my brass ring. Goes through the first 3. It goes through the second 3. I grab it on both sides. You can see here, I've got a hold of it on both sides. So I'm looking at it from above as I bring it close, bring it close, bring it close, wiggle, wiggle, and there we go. There we have it. We've got 2 out of our 3 rings. Next, we grab our next ring. We bring it up. We bring it through. We've got all 6 rings hanging off of it. 1, 2, 3 for the new ones. 1, 2, 3 for the old ones. I grab it. This one, it is the tightest. You can see that as I put my plier in there, I don't have much room. And when I pull my plier out, you can actually see the jump rings want to spring back into place. It's not a big deal. That is common to happen. Once you start getting in and adding extra rings, it increases the density of it. There we go. And now I have filled up my squid. So I've got my 1-1 chain, my 2-2 chain, and my 3-3 chain. And ironically, they are in completely opposite colors. I did not plan that. So the next thing I'm going to talk about are the Japanese techniques. The Japanese techniques are the same as the basic chain techniques. The reason I say that they are the same is because, for example, on my version of the Japanese flower, the lotus garden, you can see right along the top of your screen, I've got my flower down here, but this is just what looks like a 2-2 chainmail. 2 rings going through 2 little rings, 2 big rings through 2 little rings, 2 big rings through 2 little rings. It goes all the way down, 2 to 2 to 2 to 2. It is the same thing. The Japanese techniques, though, they use a different nomenclature. Got myself tongue-tied there. Nomenclature. rather than calling this a 2, 2, they call it out based upon how many rings go through the same ring. So here you can see we've got 2 rings, 1, 2 of the big rings, and they've got 4 little rings going through it. That would make this a Japanese 4 and 2. If there were 1 ring here, it would be a 4 and 1. So the nomenclature, it just tells you how many rings are going through 1 ring. Right here in the center of my flower, I'll bring this up front and center. You can see I've got 10 rings going through the center of that flower. So thus 10 and 2. So to do a Japanese technique, we start out with our center rings. So whether it's the flower that you're doing, whether it is a Japanese, something like the Japanese lace, you want to start out with your 2 rings that are closed. You're then going to take your open rings and you're going to close them around the outside. Now you can do the reverse. You can start out with all of your little rings closed and then have your open rings be the big ones. But I decided to start out with 2 closed big rings and doing the little rings around the perimeter. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm getting ahead of myself in counting. This is number 4. And you can see it, I'm just passing it back and forth. That's 4. This is 5. And I'm getting off my mark a little bit. Number 6. Always do watch out. Make sure you do get through both jump rings. It is, especially as the density of this increases, it's easy to grab one and miss the other one. But here is number, I've lost count, number 7. Which makes this one number 8. The only reason I can keep count is because I color coded everything. So here's number 8. Number 9. And number 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You can see it really fills things up. I don't remember whether or not I've done a shaggy loops class yet. I'm pretty sure I haven't. But when I talk about the shaggy loops, I'll be talking about this again, because this really full look is what the shaggy loops also is going for. You can see just how many jump rings are on here. It gives it a really full shaggy look. Thus why shaggy loops takes advantage of the same sort of thing. Next, we do 2. We're splitting off our rings into pairs. So 2 rings get 1 ring. 2 rings get 1 ring. And close. And this is different than how I actually do it in the directions. The way I wrote the directions are for a slightly faster method. This might be a little bit simpler. So, watch out so that you do not accidentally grab 3 rings when you mean to grab 2 rings. You can see here I accidentally got 3. Drop it down to 2. And there we go. Close that up. 1 and 2 and done. And next is 1 and 2 and closing it up. Find my next pair of rings. Also make sure that you are getting the next pair, that you don't accidentally grab and leave one hanging free. Nope, you want to make sure that you're grabbing the next pair. So, 1 and 2 and close, and 1 and 2. And it's fun to get a little mantra going. There we go. 1 and 2 and there we go. Go. That is 3 down. 2 to go. 1, 2. And I hook and I close, grabbing on both sides, twisting up, twisting down. I love to do this when I'm watching TV. It is so much fun and very easy to do. You can go ahead and just kind of veg out a little bit. You don't have to focus super hard on what you're doing. You can just sit there and open and close and link and open and close and link. Though usually you want to go open and link and close and open and link and close. Otherwise, if you try to open and close and link, you're going to run into the problem of your rings are already closed. There we go. I've got my 5 rings on the outside. So the next thing I do is I take 1, 2, 3, 4 with the little rings. I grab them right there, right there. Notice how I used the tip just to hold the ring, and then I moved to a better position so that I have more grip by working in the bend of the ring. Wiggle, 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 wiggle. Boom. And you do this all the way around. You grab it. I used the tip to position, and now I'm working down in the bend of the ring, and I am holding it, and I am putting it onto the screen, and it's a lot harder to do when I try to stare at the screen, so I am going to keep looking down. I know it looks funny when I keep looking down and off camera, but that's kind of what I need to do. And there we go. And as I build this, it will continue to make these little triangles all the way around. 1, 2, 3, 4. Grab it here. Nobody's at the door. I also love to rhyme. So, does anybody have a favorite rhyme out there? So, I'm also, if you've ever taken a class with me, I know that I sometimes have students who watch these. You will know that I like to sing when I'm playing with my jump rings. My favorite song is If I Had a Million Jump Rings, If I Had a Million Jump Rings, because I have a lot of jump rings, and somebody keeps taking all my jump rings. And I know who it is. So, said somebody keeps using 1 or 2 of my jump rings in order to finish off her kumihimos. I will not say who it is. You are welcome to make guesses at who it is in the comments. That will probably annoy her. Get better control. There we go. Adjust and close and close and close. And here we go. And adjust and close and close and close. And I'm almost done. So, and this is the hardest one. And I grab, and I close, and close, and close. And close, and close, and close, and wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. There we go. And that gives me my little 5-point flower. Now, because I wanted to go ahead and show you something you can make. Now, this is the flower that is used in order to do my technique, the lotus garden. So, you can see on the lotus garden, use the 5-point flower. It's positioned in several different ways around the necklace. And then you've got the 2-2 chain going up the sides. You can get directions for the lotus garden from us on our website. So my favorite version of it is this one, done in 2-tone. If you take a look at the front, you can see the gold with the silver chain, gold flower, silver chain. If you take it, you flip it over. You've got the black chain with the silver flowers. So that is my favorite. But apparently my look here reminder so that I look at the camera rather than always looking off to the side or down had drifted up. Thank you, Rebecca. Also, thanks for your comment about that you can hear me. And no, she cannot steal all the jump rings she wants. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little flower, I'm going to make it into an earring. Well, in this case, it's going to be a pendant because I've only made one. And actually, it'll probably be disassembled by the end of the day. So, but if you wanted to make it into an earring, here's how I would go about it. So, you've got the flower. You take one point of the 5-sided star. You go ahead, do 2 jump rings through it. You close yourself a couple of extra jump rings. You go through the 2. You add 1. You add 2. We're making a 2-2 chain. Or a Japanese 4 and 2. 2 rings through 2 rings. So I prefer to call it a 2-2. But that's just my preference. 2 rings, 2 more rings. We've got all 4 rings on. Our big ring, we close the big ring. Notice I made my little rings closed here. My big rings open. Big rings open, 2 little rings closed. 1, 2, badoop. 1, 2, 3, and 4. There we go. All 4 rings. 2 to 2 to 2 to 2. Ta-da! And there we have it. You just take one last open jump ring. I'm leaving this one open because I don't have an ear wire. Also, I'm working with giant jump rings, so it will look kind of funky. The next thing I want to go ahead and show you guys is one of the kits that we have. This is the Japanese lace. The Japanese lace, you can see that Japanese, in this case, it's got 2 rings with 8 rings going around the sides. 2 to 8, 2 to 8, 2 to 8, all the way down, except at the very end where you've got 2 to 6, because there's no extra ring at the very end. But this whole thing is the Japanese lace. It is an outstanding starter project. It comes in several different colors. We have this up on our website. You can go ahead and buy it right now. We've got it in this royal blue, this myrtle green. Every time I hear the name myrtle, I think of back when I was in grade school and I watched a TV show called Saved by the Bell. In one episode, we learned one of the characters' middle names was Myrtle. And I can't remember which character made the comment teasing Myrtle about her middle name, but they called Myrtle is the name of my turtle. And since then, I always think of turtles when I hear the name Myrtle. Then we have the henna, which is this beautiful brown color. I love it. It is just this rich, light brown, sort of similar to the oxidized copper tones. The green of myrtle is a very light, sort of seafoamy green. The blue is sort of a Royal Caribbean type blue. Sort of when you think about the Caribbean, you think about that rich blue of the Caribbean. That's the color that I see here. And then the last one is black and silver. Black and silver, just a classic combination. And it's not true silver, it is of course aluminum. So the aluminum, maybe sometime I'll talk about the different metals and the different things. But aluminum is one of the primary materials that you get jump rings made from. So that is really everything that I have to say for today. These kits are available on our website. They are a lot of fun. I hope you guys had a great time today. I hope you come back next week to see whatever project I'm working on next week. I think Rebecca's been asking for me to do the helm. So I think that I have a sneaky suspicion that helm will be next week's class demonstration. And I hope to see you all there. Happy beading!